Jinggg, without a doubt the best race player in the world. He loves to dive in and create chaos, and that makes him the perfect player to learn how to dominate rank. Even with his fast-paced playstyle, he's able to maintain insane stats with a 1.4 KD, and it looks like he's just running over everyone. On top of that, recent news says that he's exempt from military service due to health issues, so we'll be seeing Jinggg dominate on the VCT stage again this year. I broke down his gameplay so you can play like Jinggg in your rank games. I'm Dopai, a 900 RR Radiant coach. My mission now that I've stopped competing is to guide those that are learning the game. If you're interested in coaching, check out my website for more details. So I reviewed Sunset, Split, and Lotus and broke them down based on his defense and attack half. Pay attention as there are a lot of common patterns you'll see in his gameplay throughout the maps. So hopping right into Sunset defense, you'll notice that Jinggg loves to play towards A. Now why is that? Why is it important that defenders fight for A control? Well, number one, there's an orb, and number two, you can set up a pretty strong crossfire. So let's break down the orb a little bit. Jinggg, across pretty much all of his matches that I've seen so far, is he loves to farm his orb on attack and defense, and because you can get the A1 relatively easily, it's basically just a free orb. As for the crossfire, you can fight from elbow, and you can fight from lane, which allows you to fight from both sides, which means that it's pretty hard for attackers to actually take that space. So how does Jinggg actually fight for this A space? Well, it's pretty simple. If you have a smoke agent, you get the one way pretty deep, and then you have one of your initiators or your omen just use util afterwards. So this could be in the form of a gecko flash really high. The omen could just blind straight, or if you have a breach, you could just stun. It's pretty much just anything you throw there and you just util dump so that you can control the space in front of the one way, and then you can grab the orb. Now this is probably going to be the most common outcome, that they aren't going to be in front of the one way and you get the orb. So typically after this, you are going to be rotating towards mid, or you can rotate towards B if they're rushing B. Don't really overthink this one, but try not to hold the one way for too long, in my opinion. If you're playing like a really slow defense, then you could, but pretty much you can just rotate and then come back later. So because Jinggg is playing A so often, he actually ended up playing B retake a lot, and let's kind of break down his B retake. The first thing I noticed is that he likes to rotate spawn side, and because he spawned instead of going market, he's able to use his nade to clear close right. Now this close right nade is a little bit interesting to me because normally I like to nade pillar because it's good for bomb denial, and it also gets that guy kind of out of that corner. But when you watch Jinggg, after he nades close right, he boombots towards pillar. And by doing this, he's able to maintain his crosshair placement towards pillar / towards main. Now, you might ask, why is that the case? Well, the nade full clears right side, boombot kind of trails towards pillar, right? So he can just keep his eyes locked onto the boombot. Because of this focus on the retake, he's pretty much able to kind of like full clear the site. And then most of the time, the enemies are just in B main. So his success rate on the B retake is, pretty high comparatively to what you would expect. And by having a strong B retake and him fighting A every round, you can see how comfortable he is on defense because he can pretty much rely on this playbook to carry him on defense and at least get like a solid 6-6 half. So moving on to attack, let's start with B side. So B control is very important, and this is because you can get the free orb. Typically you'll see the Cypher cam here to see if there's anyone aggressing, but Jingg's approach is just to insta-satchel on the little box there and hold for the swing. The timing of the satchel allows him to see if anyone crosses, so there's no chance that anyone is on the left side at all. And then after this, he's able to grab the orb, and if they want to go into the execute, he can. Breaking down the execute a little bit, he likes to do the nade on the left side instead of the right side. The right side is typically the one you'll see because it breaks more trips. But because he nades the left side, it actually means that he can focus his crosshair on the right. So that's like the same thing on the B retake with his nade. He doesn't have to move his crosshair. So after the nade, he boombots towards pillar, and then he can single satchel out into that little corner while he's focusing on the market smoke to make sure no one's running out. And then afterwards, he'll try to scale back site with util if he can. But in this particular game, he was having a little bit of a hard time there. I believe this match he was playing against PRX Mind Freak and also old former teammate PRX Moosey. So, it was a pretty hard match. So moving on to A control, he either contacts up or he double satchels. And in this particular game, again, neither of them really worked out. When he went fast, he would double satchel towards elbow with some initiator util. And in this game, he got judged. And then when they kind of like worked up a little bit, he again fought elbow. But as you noticed, he actually just got util dumped and died. And that's why it's so easy for defenders to contest A, because of that crossfire and then the util dump. So you can kind of see the power of it on the reverse side of Jingg's POV here. Overall, I was more impressed with Jingg's defense than his attack this game. Attack was like not really that strong. They didn't really work mid too much and they didn't have any strong splits. I kind of feel like he was autopiloting a little bit. So let's go ahead and move on to split. So thankfully, Jingg's split is one of his better maps. This is probably the most known map for me, I think. When I think of Jinggg, I think of split. So normally Jinggg likes to play towards A, and normally he actually jump spots A ramp a lot. But this game he's playing against double flash, and we see a little bit of a difference here is that he actually is starting rafters. So the benefit of playing rafters is you can actually jiggle the crack, and if you see something, you just nade. And if you see nothing, you can early rotate ropes, and keep that in mind, Jinggg loves to early rotate ropes because it gives him timing to fight mid. But I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. So after the nade, if they come up A ramp, he will late peek ramp, and he actually will wide swing this angle here. But notice how he doesn't actually overexpose because it's a pretty far angle. So he can pretty much convert this duel pretty often. And this fight here is just an example of how Jinggg is just not really scared to take fights, right? Like there's no util that's directly assisting him in this particular fight, and he's just comfortable with the angle, so he's gonna take it. So after the initial A fight has kind of settled a little bit, in the mid round, you know, around that minute mark, Jinggg loves to go for info. So he'll like kind of push up and fight something, or he'll get the teammates util to push something. But I think highlighting this piece of his gameplay is super important because if you kind of wait too long, you're kind of just going to be stuck playing retakes. So Jinggg loves to have that active playstyle, and sometimes he dies because of it, but it's good to keep in mind as a duelist, you should be looking for fights when the noise is kind of cut down for a little too long. And I would be remiss to not show his A ramp fight. So the most important thing here is that you have to be able to dodge the sky flash. In this case, Jinggg was trying to play anti, but gets caught still. So when the sky curves around the corner with the flash, you can actually just quick turn. Even if the sky flash pops, as long as you turn before the actual flash hits you, you are good to go. And notice, like if you go frame by frame on this flash, the bird actually explodes, but he turns and he's not blind. So I guess, you know, if you want to try to get reps in that in a custom or something, it could help you. But basically, if you're going to play ramp, you have to be expecting the sky flash. And if you can, you should be able to get the first kill pretty easily. And in Jingg's case, he's kind of mastered this. Every time I've seen him fight this, he's pretty much never blind. He dodges it every time and he gets the first kill. Sometimes he'll nade after and then he pretty much fall back. So moving on to mid, like I kind of prefaced earlier, he rotates from A to ropes. And he'll kind of just push through the smoke off of timing. He will die a lot doing this actually. But you know, he goes for the timing pretty much every time when he thinks they're going up B heaven. So that's a risk he's willing to take. And honestly, I'm sure it pans out over the course of many games. You know, this is kind of just an example of Jingg's aggressive playstyle kind of biting him in the ass a little bit. And when he's not contesting from ropes, he kind of likes to start B heaven. And when he is starting B heaven, he'll have nade out and kind of just wait until he hears Skydog, and he times the nade when the Skydog goes so the enemy team can't scale with it. And then, you know, he might push up and use a boombot and just fight that space. But that's really important as a Raze player, using your nade to counter Skydog or Silver Drone or anything like that. So jumping over to attack, one of the most important things you need to know is the fast rush A. So with this, just throw the nade through this little crack here. Typically it will be used to break Cypher trips, but you can also use it to break Killjoy util as well. After you kind of run out and peek elbow, now is the time to double satchel. So typically Jinggg likes to satchel towards sight. I don't really see him satchel towards elbow too often or even go into the heaven smoke. Most of the time he will double satchel towards sight. And the most important thing here is actually not the execute, but what he does after he takes the site, which is he calls his teammates to retake A ramp control while his teammate is planning. And this detail is actually massively important because he actually wins the post plant from heaven. And it's such like a power position because typically if you play the post plant on A site, you will get pinched from screens and main, and you don't really have much space to work with. So he's being really proactive here by going back to A ramp and taking heaven. If there's one thing that you got out of the split review, it should be that A ramp / A heaven control is king in the A post plant. Other than that, he plays a pretty standard T side. Some rounds he'll start A to pressure, so he'll just throw the nade and then he'll go back mid. And the same thing, he does that for B as well. So maybe he'll boombot or just take like a quick duel, then he'll just go back to mid. Split is very mid oriented, so making a little bit of pressure on the extremities and going back mid can work really well for you. Okay, so moving on to Lotus. This one's probably the most exciting out of the three. Defense, he fights A lot. This is pretty much similar to the Sunset game where he just fights A and farm the orb. The thing that I want to highlight here is that his A fight isn't really the same every time. Sometimes he'll nade right side, sometimes he'll nade rebel, sometimes he will satchel up, sometimes after the nade he'll sit back. There's a lot of different variation here, and I'll kind of just, you know, scroll through them on screen so you can kind of see it. But it's very important that you know how to fight A and kind of when to take different variations. So I'll kind of break down some of the thought process with these. The nading on the right side will let you push up for the orb, and it'll also just stop anyone from kind of running over like with no mobility. Nading left side, aka Rebel, is intended to punish players that TP or dash across. This is commonly done against Omens, Jets, and Raises. And this left side nade is really good when you're pushing up because you want to retain rebel control. So in this specific game, one of the rounds he asks his Jet if he wants to dash up or if he should satchel. In this case, the Jet agrees to dash up. So that means that Jinggg can just nade rebel and then kind of just sit back a little bit while the Jet takes the space. But in other games, or if you're just contesting solo because you don't have double duelist, you'll actually have to nade and double satchel yourself, which is doable. Just pre-place the satchel on the floor and then nade, run up, detonate the satchel, and then do the second one, and you should be good to go. After the A fight and he grabs the orb, he would pretty much always break the door and then rotate B and just see if there's a lurker B or if, you know, he's there just in case the enemy executes. The most important thing here is because he's rotating so quickly, he's able to kind of have impact whether or not they go A or B. And when he notices that they aren't committing B or C, just looking at the minimap, he will then rotate back to A and, you know, he can get some timings here. One of the rounds in particular, because he kind of is doing this quick rotate, he actually makes it back to A, drop, gets a kill, gets rocket off of it, and then gets a 2k off of the rocket, which ends up winning them the round. So it's really important. You might be thinking, oh, you know, I feel like Jingg's rotating too much, or, you know, if I rotate this fast, there's going to be a lurker and all of that. That's not your job. As a Raze player, you are not the anchor. You should just be rotating as much as possible and kind of like being where the action is. And Jinggg does that perfectly. Okay, so moving on from the A fight, a handful of the rounds, probably less than a handful actually, you would fight towards C, and the easy way to do this is just have nade out, bounce it off the wall so it lands behind mound, and if you can get some supporting util, you can pretty much just wipe the team right there. In this case, he's asking for the Omen one way, and then his Sky is flashing afterwards, and he's just timing his nade with that fight, and he can swing off of the flash. Pretty straightforward, but it's pretty high impact. So moving on to attack, Jinggg actually loves C site. He'll actually buy a shorty on pistol round and nade early, so he can kind of close the gap and then just satchel in. This actually didn't end up working out for him this game, but round 2 he forces a Bucky and does the exact same thing and then goes for it again, which, you know, you could argue actually should have been a round win, but he pushed the smoke and died. But he loves the shotguns on C, and when he does have the shotgun, he'll just nade the early C entrance just in case anyone is fighting. Now on the rounds he has a gun, he will typically save his nade for the backside nade. There's like this corner on site and then you just have to throw it on the right side of it. It's pretty forgiving, but if you can get the nade on the right side, it lands back pillar, and that's really strong on the execute. To expand on this a little bit further, most of the rounds actually Jinggg would start towards A, and if the enemy team was fighting for A, they would just run C, he would grab the orb, and then they would execute C. And most of the time this happened because the enemy team used so much util on A, they had like 2 or 3 people there, they didn't have enough bodies / util to hold down C for the execute / post plant. Speaking of post plant, Jingg's favorite spot on the post plant is on the new boxes. He will regularly just knife out, run on top of the boxes and jump, or if he doesn't have timing, he'll just satchel up there and then kind of hide. But I promise you, if you guys play this box in the C post plant, you'll convert a lot of those rounds. The angle is just really hard to clear because you can kind of play in cover and then peek late, or you can just straight up hold the off angle. It's a little too good in my opinion. So I think that's why Jinggg likes to go C so much, is because number 1, the execute is actually pretty straightforward. And number 2, the post plant is very, very strong, and you don't even have to plant for a mound anymore, because if you play on site and you play that box, you can pretty much get a free kill every single time. The most important thing that I kind of took away from the Lotus game is that he didn't actually force the A fights too much. The rounds he did, it was very scrappy, and he'd just rather just, you know, run towards C and do that instead. But, you know, if the enemy team is giving the A space, you know, you can definitely just go A, open the door if you want, take a duel there, or you could just grab the orb, break the door, and then just do an A to B split. Those tactics are still very strong. But, you know, if they are fighting for it, you don't have to force it like I do. And I'm definitely going to try the run C tactic a little bit more. So that is the Jinggg review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. It's a little bit of a different structure compared to the second one. So let me know what you guys prefer. Speaking of which, if you want to check out the second one, that is up here, and I will catch you guys next time.